Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. Alright, appreciate everybody coming by and stopping by and taking a look at my video. So for all my people from the Philippines, magandang umaga, maayong buntag, hagala and kaibagan. Kumusta to you guys, mabuhay, almusal tayo, 4:43 in the morning. So I think some of you guys might be stirring up, getting some breakfast rolling. For anybody that's coming from Norway, tak god morgen, and let me see, what was it? Tusen tak. Appreciate you guys coming by very much. For anybody that is coming from Poland, I'll say shes to you. Jen Koyechi. Appreciate you guys stopping by very much. Now, I am showing a Magnus Carlsen versus Jan-Krzysztof Duda game. I generally follow Wesley So, as you guys in the Philippines know. But I have to be completely honest with you. This round that I'm showing here is round, let me see, it's round 11. And unfortunately, we had three different groups. We had three different sets of people draw the game. I know two of them were identically drawn. It's kind of like a common drawing line or something like that. And you know, I don't think that's very good to do, to be drawing. I'm like Bobby Fischer. I hate draws with a passion. If I'm losing a game, I'll try to see if I can get a draw in, you know, if maybe I can get a perpetual or something like that. But just to play for a draw straight out the gate, I never do that. And I'm a little disappointed in this round. So it's unfortunate that they did that, and that included Wesley So versus Levon Aronian. They pretty much played to like a really common draw. And you know, like I kind of side with the commentators on that, because they were saying it's not really fair to the other people that have to play, like, you know, like all of these different games, and they don't have the luxury of being at the top and having to draw, you know, being able to draw these games and stuff like that. So, you know, I kind of think it's unfair to the players. I think it's unfair to the viewers. And I didn't want to show you guys a game like that. I feel like you guys deserve to see a really, really nice game with some themes in it and some tactics and all kinds of stuff, you know, the roller coaster ride and stuff. So I wasn't going to do you guys dirty by giving you guys that, you know, that sad of a game. So, you know, I am, like I said, I am disappointed in you know, the way that they kind of just drew these games. I feel like they could have fought a little bit more than that. Yes. For all you guys that are ready, I have this is a good game here, the Magnus Carlsen versus Jan-Krzysztof Duda game. And it has a very thematic in-game concept that I'm going to be able to talk to you guys about. So if you guys are ready, let's go ahead and take a look, see what we have for the game. Make sure my volume's up. Good. All right, so we got E4, C5. So we'll run through these moves fairly quickly because you guys know the Najdorf Sicilian. So we see knight to F3, D6, D4, pawn takes, knight F6, knight C3, A6. So, I mean, anybody who's seen my videos in the past, they've seen the Sicilian Najdorf. I played it myself before. I think a lot of people have come in contact with it. So we see bishop to E3. We have E5. Knight comes back to B3. We have bishop to E6. We have F3. You know, we're not really worried about the trade here. We're going to be taking with the A pawn. And we have a nice open file for our rook. So, you know, we kind of have some bishop B5, knight B5s or bishop B5 situations coming. And we do have the bishop pair, so we're not really worried about that. So, but we do see H5. Queen comes to D2. We see knight B to D7. Knight comes to D5. Bishop takes D5. Pawn takes D5. We have G6. Bishop to E2. Bishop to G7. We have castles by white. And so, you know, this is a clear intention by the players. You know that with castling on this side and most likely castling on that side, you know, let me just play that castle move. That we're going to be making some pawn moves, you know, on that side of the board. So we're going to be making some B5s, you know, maybe B4s, A5s, stuff like that coming down, G4, H3 or H4. You know, we're trying to open our lines and stuff. So, you know, we're going to be swinging the rook over. Queen going to be coming out at some point somewhere. The rook is going to be swinging over. So as you guys know that have castle on opposite sides, usually there's you know, some really huge, you know, attacks that occur and stuff like that. So we see G4. A5 comes. We see A4. And pawn takes G4, which is the novelty. I think, let me see. Pawn takes G4. This is the novelty, yeah. Pawn takes g4. That's the novelty of the game. Yes. So we are in brand new territory now. So pawn takes g4. We see b5. It's not giving away a pawn because after the bishop takes, you have taken, you've taken away the protection of that piece. But as you guys will see, after knight takes g4, bishop to g5, as you can see, white is actually a little bit further ahead. They do have the ability to push this pawn and start getting some lines open. The rook can swing over. The attack for white is just a little bit faster than the attack for black. So we see queen to c7. We got h4. We got e4. h5. Knight d to e5. And so we have reached a point in the game where I would like for you to stop the video and see if you can see what is a really, really killer tactical move here for white. And we'll get back with you. A little bit warm. All right, cool. So what was played in the game was actually h6, which is not bad. It's still pretty legitimate. But a killer move in this situation would actually be queen to g2. Now, something that you guys should be looking for in your own games is a double attack. And so what this is doing, it's attacking this pawn here, but it's also indirectly attacking this knight. And so it's really preventing this knight from moving. So that's definitely something. And also it kind of lines it up with the king, which is always good. And so you kind of have a question like, how exactly do you defend this pawn? Do you push f5, which allows, pawn takes, knight takes, of course, and then, the knight gets taken up here. So you have a really big problem on your hands. Like, how exactly do you take back, like how exactly do you protect this pawn? So f6 giving a counterattack will probably be logical. Bishop comes to f4. We see f5, pawn takes g6, knight takes g6. We see bishop back to g5, which would be a really, really, strong way to play. As you can see, you have both of these files open, so it's looking really, really good for white. So after h6, we see bishop to f6. Bishop takes on f6, knight takes on f6, queen to f4. We see knight f back to g4, and you guys are going to be seeing that these knights are actually doing really, really well on these squares. They're a little bit on the wrong side of the board, but they are very deep in white's position. They're controlling a lot of squares, and they're just really causing some irritation to white because it's really, really hard to get rid of them. And it will become relevant a little bit later on. So the knight comes to d4. We see f5. The rook comes to h3. We have queen to e7. Knight to e6. The white's trying to get their own knight outposted in black's camp. So we see rook f to c8. We got king to b1. Always a safe move. Usually when you castle queenside, king to b1 is going to come. We see rook a to b8. Rook to b3. Just making sure we protect this bishop because, we have some possibilities of some sacrifices coming and pushing pawns down. We definitely don't want to see that. So the queen comes to h4. We see queen down to d2. Queen to h2. We snap a pawn off on a5, and then we see queen takes c2. King goes to a2, and then we see rook to a8. Now, backing up, you want to be really, really careful here because you don't want to just go off grabbing rooks because you're going to be looking at queen to a7, and then you're looking at some problems. You have checkmate coming on g7. Oops, that's not what we play. So queen taking b3 is actually what the computer actually is like, hey, do that. So like I said, anytime you get in a situation where the computer's like, hey man, just give your queen away, like it's bad. So we would be taking here, and then after the knight comes to f7, we see h7 check, king to h8, queen takes f7. As you guys can see, this is a very, very dire looking situation for black. You don't really have a lot of moves here. So backing up, we did see rook to a8. We got queen down to e1, and then we see rook to c4. It's a nice idea. Because, of course, if you take here with the bishop, you're going to be looking at this. And that is pretty bad. You're going to be dropping this bishop. And that's not pretty. That's not where we want to be at. But in this particular situation, knight to f3 is actually a really, really nice, annoying move. Because now you're knocking the queen, and then where does the queen go? Does the queen come over here and then get forked? Or does the queen come here and gets forked again? Or, better yet, threatens checkmate over here. Or check and then, some other nasties. So unfortunately, you know, you're forced to, you know, throw the pawn away on a7, which the king's just going to step over. And then ultimately we have to take on d2 because that's just too thick of a threat. Then the queen will take back here. But like I said, we saw rook to c4. Rook did come to d4. Bishop. So the rook takes on d4. Knight takes on d4. We see queen to c5. We got knight to e6. You know, this is a really good situation for that knight. The knight, you know, is just seeming to like really kind of, you know, cause black some problems. But ultimately, you know, it's a little bit better for black here in this position, like I said. Yeah, I mean, position they're doing good. I mean, they have some pawns rolling, stuff like that. So that's kind of nasty. So the queen comes to a7. We see rook to c3. We got knight to d3. And so, like I said, I mean, these knights are just really annoying. These knights are really annoying. Being able to just kind of hop around anywhere they want. They could be here. They could be here. Be here. So if you can ever get some monster knights like this, go ahead and do so. I give you permission. You can say Kelvin said so. They're gonna be like, who's Kelvin? It don't matter. They don't need to know. So the bishop takes on d3. Pawn takes d3. And then we see b3 protecting the pawn here. So things are getting a little bit better for white here. So the queen goes to f2 with check. Of course, that forces the trade because, you know, your queen's independent on e1. Queen takes f2. Knight takes f2. And we see rook to c7. Knight comes to g4. And this is the point in the game where a Zweitschenzug move was really important to throw in between because it just made things a lot easier for you. We saw king to b2 in the game, and that gives away the pawn on a6. But I think if you guys stop for a second and look, you guys actually have a check that you can throw. And it forces the king to h8, and then you move king to b2. The thing about it is, anytime you have a check available to you, the other side has to parry that check. And so they don't have time to push the pawn. Now, what Carlsen was thinking here was that, you know, he needed to get into the square of this pawn because the square of the pawn is soon going to be this. Come on. It's soon going to be 2 by 2. But, you know, he didn't think for a second, you know, that he could just throw that pawn up. He might not even been looking over there really and just kind of made the move. These players are playing a little bit fast. You know, it's a 15-minute game, so it's not like you have all the time in the world. So we see knight taking h6, king to c3. Knight comes to g4. We see king taking on d3. We got rook to b8. King back over to c3. We got knight to e3. Rook to g7. So we got king to h8. Only move. Rook takes g6. Knight takes d5 with check. King comes down to b2. We got rook to e8. Knight down to d4. f4. Rook takes d6. Knight to b4. We have king to c3. Knight comes down to a2 with check. We have king to c4. We got rook to e3. Rook to f6. Rook to c3 with check. King comes to b5. Rook to c1. Knight takes on f4. Knight takes on b3. We got knight takes on b3. Rook takes on b3 with check. And then we have rook to b4. Now, the in-game theme that I'm trying to talk to you guys about right now is basically what's called building a bridge. And it's part of the Lucena position, which is basically considered the key to all rook endgames. A lot of the times when you have a situation where you have a king and a pawn and you're trying to force it up the board, you know, you build a bridge to basically make it impossible, you know, for the for the rook to actually have a clear line to the pawn. Because unfortunately for black, he is actually on the wrong side of the pawn right now. He wants to be over here on a8, and so it'll allow his king to kind of try to walk over, but he's on the wrong end, and so that's basically the Lucena position. And so usually the king is a lot closer, but the king is very far away, and that is relevant because the rook comes to a3, you push a5, king comes to g7, you push a6, keeping connection with the king and the pawn, and then after king to f6, you've successfully built the bridge with rook to a4. And there just really isn't anything left to do. Like I said, this rook is on the wrong side of this pawn, and the king is just a little bit too far away. So the rook comes to b3 with check, and we see rook to c4. And it is in this position that Jan-Krzysztof Duda resigns the game. Basically, even if you were to get the rook behind the pawn in this case, you push it up to a7, and then basically completely restrict the rook to a8. And then you're able to start moving the king up. There is no way that this king is going to get into a legitimate area to be able to, you know, ward off the attack. And then the rook only has the possibility of coming here. After you castle, the rook is going to take, you know, the rook is going to take. And just to speed through this type of end game, you know, we're going to be doing this. Let's just do the fast route, right? Just to show you guys who might not know, you know, how to checkmate with a rook and a king. Steps close. Bam. Bam. Waste the tempo with the rook. Knock the king over. Waste another tempo with the rook. And I've just messed up my screen. Let me see if I can get it back. Bam. Bam. Kind of. My mouse, my DPI on my mouse is too high. So it's messing up. So I was at rook to g4, and then the king would come over and you deliver checkmate here. That's just one way you can do it with the rook. There's also the box method when it comes to the king and queen or king and rook and stuff. Basically, if you can get the job done, it doesn't matter how you do it. Just do it your own way, however you feel like doing it. But those generally going to be the two ways you do it. Anyways, like I said, you know, this is just something that he might would have calculated at move 60. After king coming to c4, that there is just no way to win this type of endgame. So, I appreciate you guys coming by very much. Tesantak, Maraming Salamat Po Sa Nana Nude Inga King Maga video. And Jen Koyechi for coming by and taking a look at my video. And I will see you guys next time.